Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode number 94. Today's episode is called Self-Isolation. So today I'm going to talk about the benefits to self-isolating. There are a lot of drawbacks to self-isolating, like not being able to meet people. I guess I'll talk about this in regards to the situation where it's being enforced on people, where you do need to abide by self-isolation for the better of other people. In this situation, it's a little bit more extreme than the usual self-isolation, which you can voluntarily do for yourself. So with the situation of enforced self-isolation, where you can't actually make contact with other people and you can only be around very few people, your family members, potentially that's all you're going to be around, that's a difficult circumstance. That's something that the best way of approach is just day by day. Take it day by day. It is difficult, but today's episode is more about the benefits to self-isolation, because that's the only productive way to look at it. Because you're stuck in a situation that you don't have a choice anyway. The only choice you do have is how you look at the situation itself. So today's episode is about some of the potential opportunities that self-isolation brings. So for me, with self-isolation, the huge benefit to this is that you're spending time by yourself. You've got the opportunity to spend time by yourself. I'm going to talk about this from the point of view of somebody who is a single person in their 20s, or somebody who's in a relationship, or maybe you haven't got a family yet. I know it could be different for somebody with a family, so I'm not really going to speak about that. Maybe you might get some stuff from this. Potentially you will, but I'm going to talk mainly to the person who is not married with children. This is an opportunity for you to look at this as an opportunity, rather than it's something that's going to be a hindrance to you for however long this is going to go on for. So the biggest opportunity here is that you've got a chance to be by yourself and a chance to understand how you feel about things, how you feel about your life, and how you think about the world. So over the years, I've been gradually finding opportunities in my life where, objectively from the outside, you could call it self-isolation. It's not like, the way I look at today's situation is that it's a very condensed, very extreme version of self-isolation in regard to my life. I mainly try and spend some time alone by myself because I want to know how I think about things, where I want to see my life going, what matters to me. All this stuff I haven't been able to get without spending time by myself. I think it's virtually impossible to understand yourself, to really understand yourself, if you're always surrounded by somebody else, if you're afraid of being alone. In my understanding, you can't get to an understanding of who you are and how you see the world if you don't spend some time alone. It depends on where you're at right now. I know it can be difficult if you're somebody who's got into the habit of not wanting to be alone. A lot of the time, what's stopping us from wanting to be alone is that we're not comfortable with ourselves. We're not comfortable with the thoughts that go through our head. We're not comfortable with how we feel about ourselves. That's been a big one for me, is that I didn't feel good about myself before. I had so many judgments about myself. Even initially, spending time by myself, thoughts that would come into my head before would be like, oh, you've got no friends, and those types of thoughts. So they are very, very unsettling to face. It might be a bit different now because everybody's enforced into the situation. So I guess that's the positive side to this extreme thing, is that you mightn't have those thoughts going through your head because it's the situation everybody's in right now. So that's why I'm talking about seeing this as an opportunity, because it's enforced. It's not optional at the moment. So what tends to happen then, there's a lot of uncomfortableness sitting with yourself. I still struggle with this today. At the moment, what I do is I'll read a book. I'll watch some films on Netflix as well, which are things that just help me understand life. Oftentimes, there's so many great lessons in movies. If you watch movies that are relevant to where you are right now in your life, So I find that useful. I also go for a walk, and I spend some time as well just sitting by myself and just seeing what goes through my head. Like, this is something that I can do now because I've got a level of comfortability in myself that I'm okay with doing this. I think maybe there's a time before where I would have driven myself mad. I guess that's actually kind of what happened now that I think about it. 10 years ago, I was in a remote part of France. I was very isolated, but my mindset was completely different then. It was I was starting to come to terms with the fact that I didn't know how I thought about the world because I'd been so brainwashed by everything, like society and religion and everything. I didn't know what I thought about myself anymore. I didn't know what I thought about the world. I didn't know what a good life is. Didn't know any of these essential stuff. I wasn't clear on, and I drove myself fucking mad. That's where a lot of the anger and the resentment came up, because I realized I was stuck in this maze of not understanding how I saw the world or what mattered to me or who I am. All these vital and important questions about life, and I just got so angry and so resentful about the world fooling me and deceiving me like that, and I couldn't figure my way out. I got caught in my mind. Whereas today, when I am by myself, I realize that it's a reflective manner that I find truths about myself and how I see the world. So it's a lot more. The feeling is completely different. It's a lot more relaxed and calm and centered. Before, when I had that mindset, it was very, very. It was crazy. It was like anger, agitation, anxiety. Like, when those feelings come up for me now in isolation, it's I sit with them more. I acknowledge them more. I'm able to realize what's going on there. Whereas before, I didn't even see the emotion. I just was caught in my thinking. I didn't even think about the emotions that were underneath all that thought and all. Like, what generally can happen there is that, like, you get into a world of conspiracy theories, you get into a world of paranoia, you get into a world of anger and annoyance, and you're just focused on the thoughts in your head. And you don't realize it because you haven't got that awareness yet of what's driving those thoughts, what's driving those emotions, what's driving those insecurities. So, fortunately, if you're somebody who's listening to this, you're probably not like how I was 10 years ago. You're probably not at that stage. What you might want some insights into is, how do you do this? How do you see the benefits of self-isolation? And that's what I'm talking about today. It's developing that capacity to, like, sit with the stillness and sit with the silence, being comfortable with that. And if you're not used to that, just spend a minute or two a day doing that, just any kind of small wins at all. And if you're listening to this podcast, then chances are you're into reading. So I would suggest to read books. Spend your time reading books, and then as well, just find a balance. Like, you also need to laugh as well. So watch stuff that is funny, or engage with friends online as well that you find funny, that uplift you. So it's all about, like, uplifting your spirit, but at the same time as well, taking this opportunity to sit in the silence and realize what matters to you, because it's uncomfortable, but you're developing that ability to sit with the uncomfortability, and you're also developing that ability to get clear on what matters to you in your life. So that's going to stand you massively in the long run when all this kind of subsides, when the world changes. I don't know what's even going to happen after this. The world could go back to the old ways again. I hope it doesn't go back to all the old ways again, or it can maybe change the world as well in some way. We don't know exactly what's going to happen next. But the best way you can be ready for whenever things resume, when they gradually resume again, is to get clear on what matters to you, career-wise, relationship-wise. Get more clear as well, a sense of, like, what's important to you. Like, do you want to actually find out, like, who you are and what this world is? And, like, ultimately there's no concrete answers to that stuff, but it's a way of living. It's like, are you somebody who wants to seek out your truths in life and see what life really is in your own personal experience? Or are you somebody who's content with continuing on the facade of everything being solely focused on career and money and how people perceive you and fitting in with the group all the time. That's the choice you can make now. You can go, do you want to be more an individual, like finding out who you are and then work in a collective, or do you want to continue on working in a collective that you don't necessarily know who these people are anyway, and a lot of it feels like a facade, that there's not actually much truth there. So that's the opportunity you can have there. Like when I look back at my life, what self-isolation, gradually bringing elements of that into my life, has done for me is to help me to figure out who I am. So then my relationships are based off of who I am more so than before. It was like figuring out who these people are and then fitting myself into a mold that would meet their criteria to be friends with. So it's a philosophy of let the chips fall where they may. It's like my priority and most important thing to me is to figure out who I am, what I like doing in my life, what matters to me, and then let the friendships, relationships, and all that kind of take care of themselves. Like people will vibe with you or they don't. That's it. So that's my take on self-isolation. I think elements of self-isolation are actually quite beneficial in life. Like when you say the word self-isolation too, when I say self-isolation, the immediate thing I think of is like some monk or some hermit in the woods. It's got those connotations. So it's probably not even the best word to say. I'd say the best, well, I suppose it's the relevant word for right now because it is quite extreme. But when things do back to some sort of normality, think about it as some alone time. Are you carving out enough time in your day, in your week, for some alone time? And for me, it's been fluctuating as well. Like I'll go through periods as well, maybe a few months or a year or two, where I have more of an inclination to be alone than other times. So just kind of go with the body too on things, going with how you're feeling on things, because oftentimes I just get sick of people in general. Like I do. At my core, I like people. That's why I do this podcast. I like helping people, and I like engaging with people. I like talking to people. I like people. But at the same time, I get really annoyed by people too. I think I get annoyed by our egos, and I like people when they're being real and honest and vulnerable. That's the same thing myself. Like I don't like me when I'm coming from a place of ego. And I do like myself when I'm actually being vulnerable and I'm being honest and I'm being real. So they're the two sides of myself that I like and don't like. And that's how I see the world as well. Before all this, from my point of view, there was a lot of that ego stuff going on and stuff like that. And it is what it is. It's a hard thing to figure out because even my own experience, I don't know fully whether it's coming from ego or not until things play out a bit more, and then I realize a bit more whether something's coming from ego or not. So it's a very complex dynamic, but I think there was a lot of unconsciousness to begin with around that. So you can take this time to be more conscious of who you are, how you're operating, when you're being fake as well. Like you get that sense as well when you're being fake. You might not necessarily know why you're being fake, but even that's progress. Just pulling yourself up internally. Internally, you can pull yourself up and say, just acknowledge it. I was being fake there. I don't know why I was being fake. Oftentimes for me, it's been an insecurity. It's always been about how I think the other person perceives me. It's not even their perception of me. It's how I think about what they think about me, which is a mindfuck. So the first step is to acknowledge when you're being fake, and then you can take some time to journal on it, even talk it out as well with yourself. I do this on podcasts. I talk things out. I also do it in private as well, where I talk things out on a video camera. I'll talk about that in another video about video journaling, because journaling, I don't always journal. I write blog posts, and I don't oftentimes write down stuff personal to me. I do that more so with video, just speak things out, because I just find because with the blog posts, I write them. I'm so used to writing them on a laptop now. When it goes to the written word, I very infrequently do it. Maybe it's something I'll try and get better at. But I just find it slow and cumbersome right now because the way the world has gone is that we're always using laptops and stuff, so very few people actually write things out. So maybe that's something I need to improve in myself. But I found that video journaling actually helps a lot more than to actually more consistently do it. So I'll talk about that another day. That's another option for journaling. So that's it today. Hope that made some sense. Hope that shed some light, gave you some hope during this time of self-isolation. And thanks for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.